Okay, hi everyone. So the instructions I got from Ignatia was to tell you a little bit about myself, to tell you a little bit about the origins of African parks, what we do, how we do it, where we do it, and then to go into some of the lessons learned over the years of this wonderful journey that we've been on. So, yeah, maybe just to start out with. 57 years old, so not quite as old as Ignacio and Christoph and others here, Tim, France. Yeah. But we have something in common, white males. So, but I'm the young white male in the room. So 57 years old, and my journey with African parks and conservation, to be honest, has been almost as long as that. So long journey, many lessons learned along the way, and Ignacio has given me 30 minutes to summarize all of that. So I'm going to do my best to do so. So I think, like many of you, just chatting to some of you and listening to your experiences growing up, I think that let's just do by show of hands. Who had an early childhood experience, say before the age of 18, where you connected with the nature, and which is why you are here today? So, okay, I'm looking for the exception. So there's the odd one. But that was exactly me. So I was born in Zimbabwe, grew up in Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe was a country that had the most incredible wildlife protected areas. And it's just what we did. We spent our weekends in nature. We spent holidays in nature, and it was, to be honest, taken for granted. So I went to a boys' boarding school. I didn't elect to go to a boys' boarding school, but I was sent off to a boys' boarding school. Very luckily, there we had one of the country's leading ornithologists. That's a bird person for people that don't understand big English words, it was an absolutely amazing experience. The age of 13 is doing taxidermy, bird ringing. I think I got my international bird ringing license at the age of 14 or 15, bird photography. And then we started establishing our first protected area on the school property. It wasn't big, it was only about 1,000 hectares. But as you can imagine, boys' schools don't have money to establish protected areas. So it was all done on the blood, sweat, and tears. And I can say blood, sweat, and tears of schoolboys. And that's what I did for 6 years. Building roads, building dams, fire breaks, all the reintroductions. So in a way, what we're doing now is, in many ways, just a bit more complicated, bigger scale, but comes from those days. Then here, the things that introduced that I loved was I loved the wildlife, I loved the birds. But I always had this kind of interest in the strategy, in the business, and the money, in the economics of nature and wildlife. So, obviously underpinned by nature, but more in the interests of the business of nature. And so I went off to university. I studied a degree that was a combination of economics and sciences. I also did that for a master's. And then I went off to work in a protected area in Zimbabwe called Matusadana National Park. Beautiful park. And that was right at the height of the poaching crisis in Zimbabwe, where in particular black rhino were being absolutely hammered. Quite often we'd spend the night out in the park, and every night that we were there you'd hear gunshots, and in the morning you'd go walking and you'd find the carcass of a black rhino. It was a system that was broken. The will of the Parks and Wildlife Authority just wasn't there. They were totally demoralized. They didn't have enough people. They didn't have the equipment. They didn't have the funding for it. So, literally, the solution at the time came from the private sector, where they hobbled together, compiled as much money as they could find. And then they embarked on a dehorning exercise, where then the horn of the rhino is basically shaved off, and that takes away the incentive for poaching. And that was at least the theoretical solution to the problem. This is a particular animal that I personally tracked for, 4 or 5 hours before we were able to get the helicopter in to come and dart it. and it was shot 4 or 5 days after it was dehorned. And the reason for that is for a poacher that is walking through the bush at night, they are taking risks, to be able to track an animal that doesn't have a horn at the end of that effort. It's way better to eliminate it. So tomorrow night, you're not throwing your effort after foolhardiness a second time. And for me, it was just like, how can this be happening? This was a bit of a definitive moment where the feeling was there has to be a more professional way of bringing about conservation and making sure that there's adequate money in the system to do a whole lot better than was happening at the time. So, before I get into the core of African parks, I wanted to set the scene for. Sorry, let me just pause there. I've forgotten an important part. So, after Matusadona, I then went and joined Deloitte Consulting. So, this is a managed strategy and management consulting organization. And I thought if I joined them, then I'll get them to be able to do what I wanted to do, which was to start helping with the protection of nature north of the Limpopo River into Africa. 8,500 protected areas on the continent, and so many of those needed a solution. It took me 2 years before I realized that Deloitte Consulting wasn't going to do what I thought they should be doing. And I wasn't really doing what they thought I should be doing. So I actually joined the State Conservation Authority, South African National Parks, which as a foreigner coming into a system like that, not speaking the lingua franca of the day, which is Afrikaans, didn't know a word of it, I still don't, despite having lived in the country now for nearly 30 years, which I'm not proud of, by the way. And started to try to persuade the leadership of South African national parks that they should be looking northwards onto the continent to be able to have way, way greater impact than just being parochial at the South Africa level. Again, I didn't convince anyone. I was told that this is a state institution, it's limited by its statutes, and it has to be in South Africa. And so I was like, okay, well, in that case, maybe it's time to set up our own organization that does what I thought needed to be done. And that was a long journey. So I knew that we needed the political credibility to be able to engage with governments if we were going to be taking on these core protected areas. Needed the political credibility to make that work. And at South African National Parks, we had the most fantastic, very eminent member of the ANC government. He had been on the military high command of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the African National Congress, and someone that didn't want to go into the political race, even though at one stage he was number 2 in the ANC, so he could have been the president of South Africa, but very committed to nature. And because of his liberation credentials, was the perfect guy to be able to be leveraged, to be able to, in terms of relationship with Zambia, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, all the countries that had gone through their own liberation struggles. Secondly, I knew that we needed someone with conservation credibility. I was just the young guy with bright ideas. I had no credibility myself. And that was Dr. Anthony Hall-Martin, extremely well-known specialist on rhino and elephants across the continent, and a wonderful, wonderful visionary man. The third element that I knew we needed was the business and financial acumen to be able to make all of this happen. And so the 4 of us were there together, and it was like, okay, there's one thing that's really short here, and that's money. And so we found a Dutch guy, Paul van Tenner van Vlissingen, wonderful individual, learned a huge amount from him, both in terms of how to do things and how not to do things. And we managed to persuade him to give us our first $50,000. And that was all in the year 2000. So we had all the ingredients to be able to bake the cake. But it took us 3 years to persuade a government to trust us enough to be able to give us, not to give us, but to hand over the responsibility for one of their protected areas. And that was in Zambia, and it was in Malawi. The two happened almost at the same time. So that was in 2003. So then I'm going to park African parks for a bit, and I want to just give the context of Africa, which in many ways so many of you have already touched on. The first is that it is a continent of huge opportunity. I mean, everyone here associates Africa with the incredible landscapes and the incredible wildlife that equally have defined every single one of the cultures on the continent. So wildlife, landscapes, and cultures all go hand in hand. 25% of the world's biodiversity, so any global solution to conserve nature has to include Africa. Otherwise, we're aiming low. But just in terms of that context that we're operating in, so huge opportunity, but also some massive challenges. So we've heard about some of the sizes. Some of these areas. I always like this map of Africa on the right-hand side of the screen, just to give a little bit of an idea of the complexity. So there's 54 countries in there, 2,000 different ethnic groupings, 2,000 languages. And you can see how you can kind of push everyone into Africa. And I'm sure if we find some space, we can find some room for Australia in there as well. It's big and it's complex. Secondly, we're facing a set of circumstances which is very, very different from all of the other continents. We've got this massive population increase that is happening. So we're going to go from 1.5 billion people to just under 4 billion people by 2100. And when you combine that population pressure with the challenges that we have in Africa, and I'm going to call a spade here, where you've got often very weak governance, often high levels of corruption, and low formal growth in the economy. The economies are not absorbing those people into it to be able to give them a decent livelihood. So where does the resilience come from? It comes from nature. It's only human that people want to survive and get a better life for themselves. So nature and natural resources is the resilience of Africa. So it's helpful in one way, but on the other hand, it's getting drawn down at a most alarming rate. This is a satellite photograph of the Sahel. I don't know which you want to look left or look right. It seems to be this way. So this is the whole of West Africa. I think there's 17, 18 countries that are represented there, taken in 1990. And you can see from the chlorophyll map what has then happened up until 2020. So that is massive, just going back again, massive deforestation that's taken place. And that Sahel is moving from the Sahara and is basically moving now to the sea. And with that, you end up with the most incredible social problems. This is taken from the World Terrorism indicator. Every single one of those dots is a terrorism incident that has taken place. Different colors mean at different periods in time. It is the terrorism hotspot in the world. And it is not, yes, religion is an element of it, but it is not actually a religious problem. It is fundamentally an environmental problem that is arising because of that Sahara moving south, the destruction of habitat, and the fact that people have no hope in life to be able to do anything, and you have the conversion to Islamic extremism. So that's where we're sitting up in Benin at the moment with Penjari National Park and W National Park. Guys like Eric, where's Eric? There's Eric up there. Eric is from, that's where Eric operates, guys, in the middle of the world's terrorism hotspot. So very, very challenging conditions. I just saw this morning, I don't know if you saw, Gene, we had another attack last night in Penjari National Park. And these are not people coming and breaking windows and stealing something. These are all, extreme militants, very, very sophisticated. We've had drones, what do you call it, where drones are actually armed and used for the first time now this year. This is what's happening up in that area. Similar area, by the way, on this map. I just want to use it to illustrate the problem that we have. In that left-hand drawing there, we've got 54 official gazetted protected areas, so according to the World Database on Protected Areas. Even though it's gazetted on paper, when you look at the reality and you bring in the deforestation and the human settlement, which are the grey and the red, you literally end up with, so looking to the left-hand side, there are literally 2 parks out of those 54 that are actually left in reality. And that, folks, is the sense of urgency. You can, by the way, you can choose that across, it'll vary differently in different parts of Africa, but it's pretty representative. So even though we talk about 8,500 protected areas, in reality, there are way, way fewer. As I say in this map, there are only 2. And so, yes, we can lament that. That is the reality. But the sense of urgency is so that we do something about these to make sure that these areas don't end up looking like these areas in the coming years. So this is the current portfolio at the moment where we operate in the various countries. We have the responsibility for 24 parks. And when we talk about responsibility, I'll explain the model a little bit more just now. But that is effectively total responsibility for everything that happens in that park. We can get partners to execute some of it, but we want responsibility for it because that gives us accountability for delivery. 13 different countries, it's 20 million hectares. Our total annual budget this year is $200 million, and we've got just under 6,500 employees. And importantly, and this has been picked up a couple of times, nearly every one of these areas have got people either living in it or living around the bigger landscape as part of it. And all but one of the 24 have some form of legal resource utilization from the park. So what is the model that we apply as African parks? The model is the same across the different parks, but obviously the way that one implements it and the tactics are a little bit different. And we talk about our 3 M's, the mandate, the management, and the money. And I'm going to go through each of those quickly, just to explain what we mean by each. And the management's a bit complicated. There's a few elements to it, but again, I'll walk you through step by step. So first of all, in terms of mandates, the mandate is the legal agreement that government gives to us in order for us to do government's work, okay? It's what gives us the legal ability to operate. And those mandates are, when I say all-encompassing, it is for everything that impacts on that park we want to have responsibility for. And as a result of that, in turn, we are accountable. So this is how it works. At the macro level, you've got government. They are the owner. They determine the legislation. They determine the policy. Some countries want hunting in the park. Some countries don't. To be honest, we don't care. What we implement is the sovereign legislation. In our view, it's all about governance. And if you've got good governance, you can probably have everything. So they remain the owner, the legislator, and they've got the statutory oversight of everything we do. Then we put in place, at the meso level, a governance structure. So it's very much a business kind of based approach, where that is a park board with a combination of African parks, with government, with other key stakeholders. That is the oversight organization that makes sure that everything that happens in that park is being very well done. And then we as African parks have the management responsibility. We appoint the teams on the ground, and they do that within that legal framework, within the business plan that is developed for the park, the management plan, the legislation of the country. So quite often we get accused of, oh, but you're taking over a sovereign responsibility. And the answer is no. It is absolutely embedded into the entire sovereign structure of the state. And when you have that level of responsibility coming down, you've got total accountability going back up again. So whatever happens in one of those 20 million hectares that we have responsibility for, ultimately, my neck's on the line. The good stuff, but equally the bad stuff. By the way, you get into more trouble for the bad stuff than you do credit for the good stuff. That comes with the turf. Get used to it. So yeah, that's the in terms of mandates. So then in terms of the actual management, so the second of the M's, that covers everything that happens on the ground in a particular park. And there are a number of different themes. Jean the other day explained the model where we've got the 3 pillars, and those 3 pillars go together. So you've got your ecological elements, that's the biodiversity, you've got your community, and you've got your revenue generation and financial. And it's a tripod. If one of those legs of the tripod is not there, that thing falls over. So it literally has to be completely integrated. So key element here is the conservation law enforcement. To be effective, conservation always has a legal underlay to it. And the legal underlay is because we're recognizing that these systems cannot just be utilized. We've got to prevent the unsustainable utilization in some way or other. By whom, how it gets utilized, what the methodologies are, what the limits might be. And so the conservation law enforcement has to be executed. And if there isn't, it's just a free-for-all. You're back to an open access system. So the ranger force that we are responsible for, 2,500 rangers, well-disciplined, well-trained, not always perfect, by the way, but they've got a very, very important function to fulfill. Secondly, in terms of almost every area that we have been are responsible for, there's been one or more species that is missing from the system, and we want a fully functioning system, so we've got to bring those species back again. And we've done it from small animals, not quite as small as some of the ones that you've been involved with, Tim, but a little bit bigger. And that obviously goes all the way through to things like elephant. I think our single biggest translocation to date is a movement of 500 elephant from two parks into another park that basically had no elephant left. So you can do these kinds of things at scale if the will is there to make it happen. So I think 37 species across the continent, 11,500 animals that have been moved. And then research partnerships. I think everyone's been just stressing the role and the importance of scientific information to answer the questions that you need. We don't do a lot of that ourselves, but we do crowd in some of the world's leading universities. We've got Harvard, Oxford, Yale, Princeton, as well as the local universities, twinning up with them to be able to help answer those key questions. In terms of community, again, it's been stressed again and again and again, and you can't do enough on this. If we could do 10 times what we are doing at the moment, to be honest, it wouldn't be enough. So you've got to just do as much as we can. 2025, we had engagements, that's direct personal engagements with over 250,000 people, explaining to them what you're doing, how you're doing it, hearing what their issues are. So that is a constant process. Environmental education and environmental education, again, you can't put enough money into it. And then building out the economy linked to what you're trying to do so that people's economic futures are tied with the future of conservation is measured in money that people are generating. $4.5 million, it's not enough, it needs to be more, but we are pushing that as hard as we can. And then the revenue generation, so that's for the park to create the sustainability. Again, Jean mentioned and spoke to Akagera 2 days ago. And the fact that Akagera now is at the point where the income that we generate is equal to the costs that are flowing out. So that now is a sustainable business model that, unless there's some major exogenous shock to the system, should be able to perpetuate into the future. But every park that we manage, even in Central African Republic, can generate more money, and that's our responsibility too, both as part of the financial sustainability, but also because economic activity is good for local people. And from 2025, $16 million means that self-generated money is now just below the European Union contributions to conservation in these landscapes. And it's the one that's growing way faster. European Union is stagnated and is starting to go down. So the money that you make is the money that you don't have to get from the international community. The management infrastructure, that's everything that you need to be able to make these areas work. The workshops, the telecommunications, radio systems, bridges, roads, if you need fences, staff housing. So it is absolutely everything to be able to make it happen, and that is part of what we do in order for those other three key pillars to function properly. Third M is the money. So this is just what African parks has looked like. We didn't go right back to 2003. But you can see from a budget, I think that was about $4 million. We were completely drawing down on our reserves. If we carried on going like that, I think we would have had 3 or 4 years and we wouldn't have a dollar left on our own balance sheet. So we had to wean ourselves off quickly, off spending our own reserves. We did that mostly by building out our donor support base. What I'm trying to show you here is not just that it's possible to grow quite nicely, but over time the combination of the endowment income, the park revenue, and then nature-based solutions, so particularly carbon revenue, you can see is kind of growing itself out. But you can only start achieving that when you've had this long-term investment that donors, whether it's institutional, philanthropic, IDA, all of that kind of donor assistance is so important to recreate the product in order to be able to generate money. So Akagera is one example. It's taken us 12 years to achieve that, but there will be more. And the more that we can have, the more that income will grow. We do, by the way, monitor our overhead cost. We're extremely cognizant of the fact that money can get sucked out of good work on the ground into big bureaucracies, and that's a healthy tension that we always have in the organization. So we've got a relatively small head office, and there are lots of parks and lots of park managers. So it's one that you've got to have a very delicate discussion with all of the park managers about how much money you're spending that they think should be going to their budgets. Of course, you need an institutional funding as well for the organization, but it's good to manage that. And our objective is to keep that under 10%. As an organization, and I think we've done that successfully now for probably 15 years. Okay, challenges. There are always challenges. I mean, that there always are. I mean, these kinds of things happen, unfortunately, all too often, and maybe not as often as this happens, but every now and again you end up with some very peculiar situations that you've got to contend with. When you translocate giraffe and they decide that they're going to run out of the trucks and get into the swimming pool because it's hot. So but just a fun one. This is a bit of a busy slide, but Ignacio did say, tell us about where you're going as an organization. And this one slide captures, if I say at a very, very headline level, everything that we want to achieve as an organization. And it takes a little bit of unpacking. So firstly, we're aligned to the 30 by 2030 initiative. We think it's bold, maybe a little bit. It's good to have the bold. It's going to be hard to achieve it, particularly in the African context, because I think we're sitting on 12% of the gazetted land. 12% of the continent is gazetted protected areas. But when you see slides like the one that I showed you, where of the 54, there are only 2 that are left in reality. That comes right back to about 4 to 5% of the continent. So get up to get to 30%. We've got a long way to go. We as an organization, we want to make sure we have the most significant impact of any conservation organization on the continent of Africa. We want to go head-to-head with FZS and with WWF and with all the other great organizations out there, because the faster we all go, none of us wants to be second, third, or fourth, and by having that kind of nice, healthy competition and collaboration, I might add as well, I think more and more is going to be done. So we're unashamed in that, and in a way, I hope that we are second or third or fourth, because it means then that so much more has been done. The mandates, management, and money, you've had that a little bit explained. Our first line in the sand is the 2030, so we want to make sure that by 2030 that we also have 30 areas under management, and we're pretty sure, give or take, that that'll be 30 million hectares. The management then is just a quality element. It's not all just about the numbers, it's about the quality behind those numbers. And every single one of those areas, the environment that they're in, the challenges they're facing is changing year by year by year. And you've got to make sure that every one of them is better year by year by year. And then the money, We're going to need at least $200 million a year. We're already on a $200 million budget. There's some nuances that drive that up, but a portfolio of 30 protected areas will cost $200 million. We want to build up the endowment, the long term, a little bit like Christoph was saying on the legacy landscapes. We've got an endowment and we are building, little bit by little bit, because we want to create a $1 billion endowment by 2030 or soon thereafter, because that'll give us a $50 million underlay to support that portfolio. And then nature-based solutions, we want at least 35 million a year out of carbon verifiable nature units. It's another discussion. But yeah, in terms of a little bit the new conservation money. Then all of this is what we call the institutional platform. So this is the head office. This is where the 9% goes to. It is the organization that is necessary to be able to secure new mandates, to be able to help and support and give good quality advice to the management teams on the ground, and then to be able to raise the money for those management teams to execute their mandates. And yeah, as I said, that is the 9%. And every single one of those, this is just the one slide out of an 80 slide strategic plan. And every one of those is unpacked in terms of exactly what it is that they've got to do in support of the mission and in support of the vision. Then what we are busy with as well, which is new, so you wouldn't have found this, what we're calling impact multipliers. You wouldn't have found this in our strategy 3 or 4 years ago. Suddenly what we've realized is that at a sectoral level, because African Parks now is probably the biggest player on the continent of Africa, we've got a responsibility not just to the 24 parks that we manage, but we've got a responsibility to the sector. So what is that sector? What are those sectoral initiatives? The first is what we call the incubator. So the incubator is where smaller conservation organizations are saying to us, African Parks, you've been there, you've done it, we like what we see, can you help us to basically become a mini African Parks? And we were doing this for years where, every time someone phones and asks for help, the answer is always yes, and you give them help. But it's loose and it's unstructured and it wasn't resourced. So now we have a little bit like we organize the portfolio of parks. We've got 5 or 6 parks in the region. We have a team of people in the incubator that help other conservation organizations to start becoming bigger and better. We have learned so many lessons along the way. Share those lessons because it's easy to do so. It costs you nothing, and if it means that it's going to save someone $500,000 on not putting the wrong radio system in place, or as I saw in one of the presentations, someone buying Land Rovers instead of Land Cruisers, we can help with those kinds of decisions. Some shaking of the heads. And that now is formalized. We've got, Jean, how many incubator partners? I've got 7 parks with 5 partners. So it's a way of scaling the impact. So instead of African Parks having to do it, we can help other organizations to do it as well. And 1 or 2 of them are doing really, really well and doing fantastic work. And it'll be wonderful to be able to say, cut the umbilical cord, and gone because you no longer need us, because you've built the institution to be able to do what we do. The second is this crazy thing called Rhino Rewild. We found ourselves in a situation where it's a bit complicated, but where we are the owner now of 15% of all of the world's rhinos, white rhinos. It was a commercial venture. The numbers had built up, phenomenally successful production. It went bankrupt, but what do you do when you have a bankrupt facility with 2,000 rhinos on it? So we stepped in, we said we'd help. Pinda have been a phenomenal partner in this, and it's with some science and disease issues behind the thinking of it. And the intention is to make sure that every one of those rhinos gets rewilded into a safe, protected area across the continent. So Christoph doesn't know this, but he's going to get a whole lot of rhinos delivered in Serengeti and in Ngorongoro and in North Luangwa and wherever else you put your flag up, because they do such a great job in making sure that they're good, safe areas. Then the third element is this conservation academy. So where are the skills and expertise coming from to be able to be, we've got the 24 parks. Each park management unit is going to be seven odd people. That's 150 people that we need to be able to managing these areas. Who's developing them? Ignacio is telling me to hurry. I think it's because we're talking about capacity development, and so it's very exciting. It's hugely ambitious, but again, we want to do it for the sector, not for ourselves. Yes, for ourselves, but it doesn't matter to us if you develop someone, they go to FZS. Once they've had a little bit of training at FZS, then they can come back into African parks for a real job. And then the sector engagement is we've kept our heads down. By the way, to a lot of criticism. So people have said, oh, you're a little bit insular. We've just kept our heads down and we've got on with the job. Now we feel that the time is right to be able to start sharing some of those lessons more and more, because I think we've got the credibility to be able to do so. It's not to be able to preach, it's not to be able to lecture, but it is to be able to share. But again, that's got to be intentional. So that's the strategy. Okay, so I wanted to share some of these values and things because I think values to an organization are extremely important. You've heard DNA come through quite often. DNA, this is your DNA, and whatever your value system is, and these are very, very important to us. I'm not going to go through them all, but the first is about having a passion for Africa. You've got to have a passion for nature, and you've got to have a passion for the people. And if you don't, probably the first question, if anyone ever wants to work for African Parks, this is a little bit of a heads up, you're going to get asked, how do you demonstrate your passion for this continent? And if there isn't anything, to be honest, you're going to be at the bottom of the queue. Learning from mistakes, we've spoken a lot about that. Mistakes only happen because you're doing something. If you don't want to make a mistake, the best way to do it is don't do anything. You know what? And pat yourself on the back for that. So we've made mistakes, but as a result of doing. A little bit the dare to attitude. This work isn't easy. None of it's easy, but having the courage to be able to do it, get out, and again, if a mistake is made along the way, that's okay, but do it. Working in places like Benin and staying in places like Benin requires courage from the team. I can go through all of them. I think a little bit of the last one, have fun. All of you put your hands up at the beginning because you love what you're doing. So connect with what you're doing and make sure that you have that opportunity to fill your cup from what it is that we do. Okay, so a couple of lessons learned. I'm going to have to move through this quite quickly. Have clarity of purpose. Don't try to be all things to everyone. Be really, really clear on it and be damned good at the execution of it. Okay. I kind of feel like I should let that sink in a bit. I know that I take a bit of time to listen and reflect. Relentless on the execution. Because if you do that and if you build off the success, okay, so don't try to do too much. Do one thing. Whatever, if it's a one thing, or if it's a one area, or if it's a one thematic, do that. And then once you've done that really well, then build out. But if you go too broad, too quickly, then everything's going to be mediocre or potentially a failure. And I'm going to just show you a couple of quick examples. This is Chinko in the middle of nowhere. Literally, it is, as you can see, it is literally the furthest point in Africa from everywhere else. You can't really see the figures here, but the figure on the right is 2016. The one on the left is 2023, 2024. What isn't here is when we started the project in 2014, our objective to the team was to achieve 100,000 hectares that were cattle-free, because you've got all these cattle coming from North Sudan, South Sudan, Chad, and just overrunning the area, and with that comes these huge levels of poaching. We said 100,000 hectares. This graph, this one here is 5,000 square kilometers cattle-free. This one here is 30,000 square kilometers cattle-free. So huge areas, and as a result of that, the wildlife numbers are just doing that on every single species. And then from there, because this has been a success of Chinko, we're now committing to Zimongo National Park, to Yatangaya National Park. And what I think is really, really exciting is, and this entire thing here is a land use plan that has been signed off by government. And in that land use plan, all these light blue, mauve and orange areas and red areas are all where there's been a formal decentralization of the control of that and the empowerment of local people to be able to use nature for their purpose. So in as much as we celebrate the success here, in all of these blue and red areas, there are 165 areas of an average of 50,000 hectares, which part of the success now of Chinko going forward is going to be making all of those individual community-based organizations successful. And all because of the credibility and the relationships that are built from achieving at the Chinko level. Yeah, people talk about funding, and you saw what you can achieve with the funding is deliver the results, and the funding will, when I say will flow. If you're not delivering results, you're not going to get the funding. So yes, of course, funding is necessary to deliver results as well. It is a chicken and an egg, but deliver the results, and I think you'll find that fundraising is a whole lot easier. I think it was Tim made this comment earlier. Be careful of mediocrity. Don't tolerate mediocrity. When you see it happening, when you see a malaise setting in amongst your staff, it requires a shake, and eventually a shake can be you know what, maybe it's time to move on. So keep on pushing, and those details matter. Humility to listen to others, but be discerning in your response. We heard Frans give a very good example of that when he was told not to use the word rewilding in the naming of Rewilding Europe, and he chose to use Rewilding Europe anyway. So listen, think about what people are saying, but be very discerning in whether you listen or whether you don't listen. Because people, particularly in our sector, are heavily invested in their opinions. That's okay. Let them have their opinions, listen to what they're saying, but then decide whether it matters and whether you are going to respond accordingly. Set your plan. Be very clear on what you are wanting to achieve, and then have the plan funded. Don't be available, if I say to the donor community, and I'm being gentle on this, to literally be an agent of what other people want you to do. You've got to be very clear on what you're doing, the merit of it, and do it. Because particularly with the big institutional donors, European Union is fantastic to us, but man, they want you to do all kinds of weird and wonderful things. And it doesn't make sense to do so, and every time we've done so, it's been a mistake. So make sure that you have the plan, stick to it, have the courage to say, that's not our set of expertise, we can't deliver that for you. If you want that done, get another partner to do it, and this is what we can do for you. Recruit for your values, okay? If you don't recruit for your values, we've been talking about, I like this thing, keeping the soul. This is the only addition that we made. Keep the soul and do that through the values of the organization. And that will transcend each of us as we move on and others come through. If you've been recruiting for values, that will self-perpetuate. And then scaling requires that platform. Running one area is different from running 3 areas, is different from running 30 areas. And I think really being very clear on that is so important, because if you want to be able to scale what you're doing, and it's important that you do, understand that you've got to be able to feed that scaling. And then because Ignacio says I can do 2 more minutes, I'm going to show you a quick video.
Torrential rains caused catastrophic flood and
drought exacerbating the hunger crisis.
Fires are still burning. The calamity of epic proportion.